Okay, so this is what we're doing. So this is a homework that you need to finish for Monday. So we're going to start this together. So what I write down, you need to do it as well. So you need to get yourselves organised. Okay, we've got this. This is what we did on Friday. Spent a long time doing it, but that's important. And now we're going to have a go at and reminding ourselves of actually how we need to write this. So while you get yourselves organised, I'm going to write the question on here. Okay, so there's our question. How do the poets explore the concept of love in Dustin and Paris? Quick quiz. What is the question about? Think, Lily. The poets. Nice, okay? So this, if you remember based on what we did on Friday, this is what the question is about. It's about the poets' choices to do what? What have the poets done in their poems? Dan? Pretty much. They've then explored the concept of love. That's what they've done. And our job is to work out how they've done it, basically. And we're using Dustin and Paris as our two particular points of reference. When you put it like that, it doesn't sound awful. So, your introduction, okay? Your introduction is 3 sentences long. Okay? Sentence 1 and sentence 2 introduce Dustin and Paris. Okay, so we've got Dustin and Paris. You will always only ever compare 2 poems, so this is kind of quite a good structure. So Dustin and Paris, so the first sentence, we'll do the first ones, and it's basically how Dustin deals with love, and then how Paris deals with love. You can blend them, so they can be in part of the same question, which is fine. Same sentence, sorry. The third sentence is over what is the connection between them. Okay, so this is kind of our sort of our joining connection. So what message do both of them have to do with love? And we've pretty much worked that one out. That's all your introduction is. You don't need to, again, you don't need to overthink the introduction because you will know what these poems are. And what I want to try and do as we go through them is to write as many different combinations of introductions as we can under as many different varieties of sort of thematic foci as we can. So you've already done those introductions, and then you just write and write and write and write and write. Almost parrot fashion, but if we've already written an introduction, you can kind of bank it, and then you simply plonk it out onto the page.
How would you write 3 sentences introduction?
We're going to do that in a minute. So this is just the structure, and then we're actually going to do it. So the rest of it, okay, is focusing on. So really, you can either start with name poem. So you start with maybe Dustin, okay, and it's one aspect of how Dustin specifically deals with love. Okay, so that's Dustin 1. Okay, and then you move over to Paris 1. These can be separate paragraphs, or you can put them in a big massive section. It doesn't really matter. Okay. Then we look at Dustin 2, and we look to Paris 2. You can decide how you want to move between each sort of significant point. So you could do with a pencil. Photography glasses don't have pencils. Oh, okay. Doesn't work. Oh, okay. So you could do equally 1, 2, and then move down to here, and then do Paris quite after that. So Paris 2 after Paris 1, and then move over to there. That's absolutely fine. That's perfect. You could do Dustin 1, Paris 2, then Dustin 2, That's equally absolutely fine. You could start with Paris and do Paris 1 and then Dustin 1. To be perfectly honest, it doesn't matter where you start. You don't have to start at the start of the poem. You can start in the middle of the poem. You can cross your eyes, and jump in. We then come to Dustin 3 and Paris 3. Okay, and that is your minimum level. So that is your minimum level. If you've got more stuff to write about, for example, you've actually got something else you want to write about Paris, or you've got something else you want to write about dusting, then you can do another one. Okay? These may be different sizes, so you may have a lot more to say about one particular point than you do necessarily about the other point. That's fine, don't worry about it. Okay? But we're trying to work out what choices do the poets make in order to do what they're doing with the concept of love, and we just want to work out how they've done it. And we're using Dustin and Paris as our particular examples of how they've done it. Okay? You may find that, I don't know, if we do another James Fenton, he does something else in a completely different way. But that doesn't matter because this is just our first example of what he's doing. Your conclusion is brief. I don't want you to lose the plot with conclusions, but you're sort of rounding everything off. You're kind of giving me and therefore love is love is love. Or there is no judgment over love. Or we need to accept love is love is love. Something like that. It can be a really sort of short, pithy statement, but don't overthink it. If you are rubbish at conclusions, fine, other people are better. I'm rubbish at introductions. I'm really quite good at conclusions. It's okay. Don't worry about that too much. But this is probably going to be no more than, again, sort of 3 sentences. You could do it as just the one. That's absolutely fine. Stylistically, what I don't want to be seeing in your introductions is analysis, like some close level analysis, okay? So an introduction is quite literally, you're just like touching the big topics, the big ideas that you're covering. Okay? So when you go to a party, you have a canapé. And the canapé is not your main meal. Your canapé, or your starter, or your drinks, or the kind of the bread on the table, that is there to whet the appetite with a WH. To get the juices flowing, to make you hungry for more. Word to the wise, don't overdo the bread. Okay? Because then you won't be able to get to this point. This part here is your main meal. This is where your marks will be coming from. The function and the purpose of your introduction is so you know what you're going to write about. If you don't do that, all of this is basically shooting from the hip. You're flailing around wildly, you don't have any kind of direction, and to be honest, it really won't be very good. If you have an introduction, I now know where you're going, I'm quite excited with the ideas you're going to talk about, I really want to see what else you've got to say, and then I'm keen to read on. It gives you that structure, it gives you that focus, it gives you the discipline. But you don't provide me with quotes in the introduction. You don't quote in the introduction, you don't do any language analysis in the introduction, it is just ideas. That's all it is, okay? So these are ideas, not that many, but no quotation. Similar to the bottom, just a round-up catch-all. And so this is what we've looked at, and this overall is kind of what we're dealing with. Again, no quotations and no new sudden point. If you go, oh, I've thought of this, that needs to be in a paragraph on its own, and then you conclude, which is why you've got these to basically your buffer zone, okay? So we have no new ideas, and it's kind of a roundup. But no quotes in the conclusion either. So roughly, each of our paragraphs. What is the concept of love? What have they done? What are they exploring? So what are they exploring? How have they done it? And then why? Why have they done it that way? What's the message? What are they trying to get us to learn? Where is the character going? So again, this is kind of the justification, okay? So the why is the justification for those choices. Now we are at the point where these three can blend and blur. They don't have to be what, how, why. They need to be there, but you don't have to be a slave to the order of them. There is, though, one condition, that you never start a sentence with a quote. Okay? And I'll give you an example. So you never go, I am trapped means that they are trapped. What is very, very wrong about that sentence? I am trapped means that they are trapped. Done?
Not actually explained anything.
You're not-
Rephrased it.
Basically. Okay, you haven't actually done anything. You've just repeated the quote. Okay, that's the first thing. This word here, you will never be asked what it means. Well, you don't know that that's what it means. Because what Holly thinks it means will be different from what Theo thinks it means, which will be different from what Dom thinks it means, which will be different from what Tim thinks it means, and which will be different from what I think it means, and it will be absolutely different to what Pithers thinks it means. Okay? So don't write the word means. Shows, reveals, suggests, implies, leads us to think that. Softening. You don't know 100% categorically, but that's okay because you're not meant to know. This part here as well. Started the sentence with a quote. Don't do that. Okay? You're going to have to get your head around it, which is why we then sort of preface it with this. You could say, at the end of the poem, the voice says, I am trapped. That bit's fine, because you've prefaced it with blah, 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 comma, I am trapped. That's fine, because you haven't started it with a quotation. Make sense? Yeah? If that's the habit that you got into in previous years, we need to try and get that out of you. So, let's start with this introduction then, shall we? Okie dokie. 3 sentences. First sentence, first 1 or 2 sentences. Paris and dusting. So, you name the poem. In the poem, and we'll try and do a couple of varieties. In the poem, dusting the phone, comma, Jackie Kay does what? What concept, overall, big overarching concept, does she explore in dusting? This is where you're looking at notes. What's the big ticket item, the big headline item? If someone goes, oh, what's dusting the phone about? What are you going to say? Lily?
The effect of ghosting.
Okay. Explores. Now, the effect of ghosting, let's try and zhuzh that up a bit. You're absolutely right, but let's try and think, let's craft. Another word for effect. Is it just the effect of ghosting? Dan?
Consequences.
Consequences, I like it. Miles?
Damage.
Damage. Right, let's write all of these down. I'm going to these are just options that we can have, and you need to choose which one. So let's have effect / consequences. You won't do this when you actually write it. You need to choose which one you fancy. Effect, consequences, damages. What else? I like damages. I like all of them actually. And you can then use these variations in the rest of it. So we're not completely disregarding the word.
What's the author's name?
Jackie Kay. Stan?
Influences.
Yeah, because it influences the mind, doesn't it? I'm going to put impact in. Anything else? No? We happy with that? You choose which one you want to do, but it's the crafting of the response. And that's why I want you to slow down. I'm not timing you on this, but I want you to slow down and try and craft it as much as you can. So in the poem, Dustin the Phone, Jackie Kay explores the sorry, effect, constant damage of ghosting. Now, is your elderly examiner going to know what ghosting means? You never know, they weren't born elderly. Okay? How can we maybe qualify the ghosting bit?
You can put in quotes and explain it after.
Yeah, you could do. Of ghosting like that is a term that we're introducing, which is fine. What actually is it? What actually was or is ghosting? Edie? Okay. The impact of ghosting, comma, the act of ignoring a lover. Can we call them lovers?
It's not necessarily though. It's not really just ignoring either. It's like ignoring and not reaching out to.
Okay, ignoring and not reaching out. Okay. Edie? What were you going to say? Should we say the lover? Because her voice is an other.
Yeah.
Let's do an other rather than the lover. Okay. How are we now going to bring in Paris? Edie? Okay, in contrast, oops, comma, was he James Fenton? Is it James Fenton? Is it? What was his name? James Fenton. In contrast, James Fenton explores what? What does he do? Because he doesn't do ghosting. What does he do? Go on, Edie. The importance of togetherness. Yeah? Are we happy with that one? Explores the... So this is all the stuff that we've covered. Importance of togetherness. Okay, so none of this is unseen. None of this we are making up as we go along.
Togetherness a word?
It is now. It is a word, yes. So that's 2 sentences. And actually 2 sentences is not just going to be 2 lines. Actually, it's a fairly decent amount. Now, what's the third one? What is the overarching umbrella that connects these 2? Go on, Edie. Yeah, okay. Both poems however, explore, no, we've used explore before. We've used it twice already. Can we use a different word other than explore? Miles? Adventure. Both poems adventure. Illustrate, I like that one. Edie, what was the point? That? There we go. That the concept of love, let's bring it back to the question, is unique and different for everyone. Lovely. That then means that you can bank in your head the conclusion, love is love is love. It's universal. Okay? And that is quite a nice sort of conclusion that you can have on there. Good. So let's go through and kind of work out what we've done. So you'll need to do a bit of colouring, or sort of highlighting. So, first of all, have we named the poems? Have we named the poets? Yes, good. Right, let's put a box around that one. Dusty in the Phone, Jackie Kay.
Is that just the intro?
That's just the introduction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
And-
thought we talk about ideas in the show.
We have.
Oh.
But what we've missed out, in contrast, James... Actually, no, we're okay. So even with James Fenton here, we haven't named the poem, but we've named the poet, because that's what the question's about. So that one's okay. You do need to make sure, though, you do put Paris in a bit later. So we've also named him. Okay. Remember, we're not dealing with analysis. We're not looking at quotes in our introduction, so that's fine. We've used the word explore there, and then we've done, illustrate there. That's quite good. Comparing words, because remember you're dealing with two poems at the same time. Good. In contrast. That's another one. And we've also got down here as well, however. Both poems, however. So you can use however as a connection, so drawing two things together. So this part here is quite good. Now what we've done here is, at the very start, in the poem Dusting the Phone, Jackie Kay does this. Remember, this is the arena that she's doing her exploring. That's her map that she's going to wander around. All a poem is just words on a page in a particular order, in a particular format. That's all it is. But for her, that's her arena. That's her performance arena, if you will. Okay? And that's kind of what poets do. But because we've given her the verb, she's doing the exploring in that poem, in that arena, in that space. We've answered the question, we're fine. And we've done the same here. The verb is tagged to the poet. The poem doesn't do anything other than sit on a piece of paper. That's all it is. It's just ink and paper. Okay? We could have done both poets rather than both poems. So we could have maybe changed that one a bit, but that's okay. We don't need to overthink it. And then this is the overall connection, which we will come back to in our conclusion. Okay? And that is how you write an introduction. So when I set you another comparison, I want you to literally copy that, but change the words to make them fit. Does that make sense? Yeah? So you start with, in the poem, you start with that. I don't know, Warming Her Pearls by Karen Duffy, I think it is. Explores the, insert the right words to make it fit. In contrast, put it in. New poet's name, explores a bit. Both poems, however, do that bit. That's your introduction done. Okay. So your homework then was to go through the two poems and finding your connections. Okay, so we're looking at 3 minimum connections, and if you've got time that come to you, you can whack in a fourth, okay? But you don't put that in your conclusion. So you use that fourth as your buffer zone before you get to the conclusion. So how are we going to start it? Are we going to do, as we've got here, are we going to start with Dustin, or are we going to start with Paris? Which way are we going to go? If Dusting is the named poem, because it's named in the question, you will have it printed in the paper. The other poem, you're going to have to choose off the top of your head. But you'll be fine, because you would have known them, and you're not going to get any nasty surprises.
You don't have them in front of us, though?
Nope. You will only have the named poem printed in front of you. You have to make the second choice. Here, I've chosen 2 for you, and they're really good comparisons. Nice. And who knows? You might get Concept of Love and Dustin and Paris in your exam.
Do you have
Happy
to analyse
days.
language?
Yes.
So you have to analyse language in a poem you don't have in front of you?
But you will have known the poem, so you would have known and revised your key points and the keywords and things that you wanted to say under those themes. It's good quality old-fashioned revision. Okay. So what is the first point we're going to cover? So down the margin, I want to write the 3 sort of headings that we're going to use. Okay, so we're going to do one together, and then you're going to write your 2 down the side. Okay, so first overall connection is what? Between Dustin and Paris. So this is where you look at your A3 sheet notes. You should have numbered them so you knew where your order was going to be. They don't have to be in that order, but it just means that you can separate ideas. So what's the first overall juicy connection between them? Who's going to start? Ella. Sorry? Illusion. So fantasy and reality. Good. We'll do that one. I like that. So fantasy and reality. That's a cracking choice. Good. That's that. We've got lots of juice we can write about that one. Second, what's the second sort of connection? Lily?
Pain and anger.
Pain and anger. Basically the feels. And the third one, what was the third one that we were looking at? Miles?
Togetherness.
Togetherness. Or not. Okay. Don't feel that you've got to choose things where they fit really nicely next to each other. Sometimes the richness and the most amount of fun you can have is when one poem deals with the together, let's skip down the lane to a field of daisies, and the other one is not being together and they want the together but they don't have the together. That then gives you that really, really sort of nice, sort of meaty comparison. Okay. So we've now pretty much got our three what's, haven't we? What are they exploring? We've already done that. That's nice. And now we can really go into the nice juicy stuff. So how are we going to start this one? So, is the reality and fantasy in both of these poems quite an important aspect, do we think? Tim, do you think it's quite important for these two poems? Do they kind of swivel on fantasy and reality? Yeah, go on, have some grit. Yes or no? Don't go yes, as if you're guessing that the answer is yeah, I think so, because we've learned it and because we have the evidence, okay? So let's start. Both poems no. What's the matter? I don't like that. Edie? I'm talking about the poems. So do what I do. Cross it out. Poets. Both poets. Okay. Use the ideas of fantasy and reality as key what? Key meaning important. Go on, Edie, idea? Key themes in their poetry. Okay, which poem we're going to start with first? Dustin or Paris? Yeah, let's start with Dustin. It was in the paper in front of us. Okay. Kay. Now we've mentioned her complete name at the beginning, and the complete name of the poem at the beginning. Any other reference to Jackie Kay or dusting, you can shorten to dusting and her last name Kay. At no point do you refer to the poet or the writer by their first name. So you will never ever call me by my first name. Just not going to happen. I mean, you can try, but it's not going to happen. Okay? So here, James Fenton becomes Fenton. But the first time we refer to the poem, we have to write it in full, and then subsequent times you can refer to it as Paris. Okay? Miles?
I was going to ask what was the word after reality before key?
Oh, as. So both poets use the ideas of fantasy and reality as key themes in their poetry. Kay does what? How are we going to write here? Well, how are we going to introduce the idea of fantasy and reality in Jackie Kay's poem, Dusting the Phone? Go on. No? You're just waving. Kay uses let's go in with the words. Let's look at what language, what examples do we have of the notion of fantasy in Jackie Kay's poem, in Dusting? We don't have to kind of like pad this out. You can do if you wanted to, but then you won't actually get anything done. If you can't think of how much to pad it, don't pad it. Jump in with the big welly boots and get on with it. Lily?
Could you say mythologise?
Yes. Kay uses, again, cross it out, that's right, mythologise, myth. mythologize words such as, insert quote, heralding, sirens, comma. Anything else that she uses? Okay, so I'm going to add a plus sirens. To what effect, Miles?
I was going to say imagining possible.
Is that the mythology? We're not going to lose imagining, but we're dealing with the idea of she's mythologizing the word. She's creating the myth. Okay, words such as heralding and sirens. What is the impact? Which does what?
It's like symbolism.
Yeah. To do what? Go on. Good. Which symbolizes. Oops. As a hero. Is the phone the hero as well? Remember, it's the phone that's doing the ringing, heralding some disaster. Okay, but the connotation, so a connotation is a hidden meaning, it's an implied meaning. You can say connotations, you can say implied if you want to, but I'm looking at the word heralding and thinking, right, it's some disaster. So we've got a bit of a contradiction here, haven't we? So it's a negative mythology. Daniel, do you wear glasses?
Oh, I've got contacts in.
Can you see the board?
Yes.
Okay, good, that's fine. So a lot of it is a hero, but the negative, some disaster, followed by sirens, establishes that the traditional, bless you, hero is more of a villain. Okay. Can we say anything about the word sirens? What were they? The epiphora. Yep. Again, K's epiphora with sirens. What is the effect of going sirens? Think about what sound does. A warning.
What's the word say after the verb then says? Second last.
As a hero.
No, second to last one.
Second to last, that one.
Yeah.
Disaster followed by the siren suggests that the traditional hero is more of a villain. K's epiphora with sirens. Remember, these are words we've already written down. You're not making this up, Dom?
Onomatopoeia.
No, not quite. That's like bang, crash, wallop. If you have a sound and you get it twice, what happens? What is that technically called? Think about your physics.
Echo.
It's an echo. Okay? K's epiphora with sirens echoes. Now, what are sirens?
One of them things on the island, are they?
Yeah, and what do they do?
8 people.
Not quite. Well, no, they did. Mainly men. But, yeah. Edie? Yeah, the actor's warning. Holly?
Like sailors or fish.
They lured the sailors to the rocks and then destroyed them. Okay? So echoes the deafening warning associated with sirens. Okay. I'm going to put a dash. I love dashes. Simply because it's kind of like a bit of an extra thought, and I can't think of any other punctuation to use. So, K is epiphora. It's a term we've already written down. So you don't have to make terms up. It is already a term I would have taught you. Okay, with sirens, echo is a deafening warning associated with sirens. And the danger this poses.
That door.
What's the matter?
There's just staring at you.
Because he's jealous. Okay, because with his like intellectual stuff. Okay, it was warning associated with sirens and the danger this poses for some. Another word for some. It's completely random. Another word for random. Begins with R, ends in arbitrary.
Arbitrary.
Oh, you're good. Okay, and some arbitrary disaster. That was quite a lot. Don't think we've quite finished that one yet. Is K warning our voice? Is K warning the poet? Is she warning the voice in the poem? Our persona. I'm just spitballing. Is the voice paying attention? I don't know. Also, just notice, look at line 4 and line 5. Disasters repeated as is sirens. Disaster sirens, disaster sirens. And it goes from some disaster to means disaster. So you've got something that's quite arbitrary to something that's now very specific. That I think is quite interesting. Can we put that into this paragraph? Possibly not. Okay? You will find that as you're going through it, there will be some points in some words you notice that you hadn't really focused on or paid attention to before because you were looking at different things, but you may not be able to squeeze it in. Don't shoehorn a point in because you're desperate for me to know what it is. Okay? If it doesn't fit, it doesn't matter whether you've written it or not, you won't be given the credit for it. So just to go with your instinct, trust the process, and we'll move on. So let's make sure that we're still dealing with reality. Both poets use the idea of fantasy and reality as key themes in their poetry. Kay uses mythologized words such as heralding and sirens, which symbolises the lover as a hero, but the negative, some disaster, followed by sirens, establishes that the traditional hero is more of a villain. Kay's epiphora, a term I've given you, with sirens, echoes the deafening warning associated with sirens and the danger this poses for some arbitrary disaster. Okay? Is there any reality here? Or is that the reality? Is the lover the baddie? If we're dealing with mythologies, good and bad, goodies and baddies. Is the lover here the baddie? I think so. What is the fantasy she's living in? Or, different question, do we move on to the Paris fantasy or the Paris reality and then compare that with a shortish ending part with the fantasies between both of them? Where do you want to go now? Do you want to get on with Paris? I think it's probably a good idea. Let's move on with Paris. So now let's look at maybe the reality, because we've talked about reality, but in a kind of a myth way. Okay, because we've said that actually he's a villain. I'm assuming it's the he. In Paris, what's the reality? Where is the reality? And is it a reality that they are willing to accept? Is it a warning reality? Is it a welcoming reality? What do we think? Edie?
A harsh reality that lovers and they're in the sleaziest hell with the cracks across the ceiling.
Okay, and I think we can bring in the dusting with that as well. Okay. Right. Fenton chooses in Paris with you. Oops, something like that. To expose the harsh reality. Is it an accepted reality? Is this what they really want to do? Rather than a forced fantasy? I think. The harsh, accepted of being in love. Okay? What's harsh? What words are harsh? Let's pick up on that one there. What words in the poem in Paris? Quite harsh. Miles? Sod off. Absolutely. Okay? Sod off to sodding. His use of, what did we call it? Lily? Taboo language. Good. Remember, I've given you these terms. You don't have to make it up. Okay? His use of taboo language. Now, how much of that quote are we going to have? You're looking at line 12. It says, the whole line says, if we say sod off to sod in Notre Dame, how much of that are we going to use? Thinking very carefully about what we're going to use. So looking at line 12, how much of line 12 are we going to use and how much are we just going to leave where it is? Jack, what do you think? I think we can... Come on, let's get excited. We're actually allowed to swear in a literary essay. Don't waste the opportunity. Archie?
Not use the first few words.
Yeah. Don't use those ones. Do we need Notre Dame? Or do we just go sod off to sodding?
No, I feel like,
Do you think we need Notre Dame?
yeah.
Yeah, let's put it in. Okay, if you have the opportunity of quoting an expletive in a literary essay, why would you hold back? His use of taboo language, quote, sod off to sod in Notre Dame. Okay, indicates. Now, another word for harsh. And it's about an attitude. Something attitude. It's not harsh. Ellie? Come on, you can think about that. If someone's not just harsh, what else could they be? Sometimes I'm harsh, but what else could I be if I take an extra step further?
Rude.
Well, yeah. Dan?
I was going to say draconian.
That was a detention at lunchtime. They wrote out the code of conduct. What about brutal? I can be brutal. I can be rude and also draconian, but we'll go with brutal. Indicates a brutal attitude to, now what is Notre Dame, Champs-Élysées, sort of impression of love? Good. To the, can you give me a scent? Is it not like fragrant? Is it clinical? Is it dull? Is it standard? Is it cliched? Maybe that's not a scent. What do we think? Is it cliche to go to Paris and let's go to Notre Dame? Think about my honeymoon. AD?